I remember that night so clearly it almost feels staged. Every flicker of the candlelight, every quiet clink of the silverware. Our 5th anniversary. Ethan had booked the same restaurant where we'd had our first date, claiming it was poetic symmetry. The waiter smiled too much, and the violinist played too softly, and still the air felt heavy, like the night was holding its breath. Ethan reached across the table, his eyes fixed on me in that familiar, unblinking way. 5 years, he said, his voice smooth but oddly rehearsed. Half a decade of you and me. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I laughed, tried to match his mood, pretending everything between us was still light and effortless. When dessert came, he slid a wrapped box across the table. Something special, he said. I peeled back the paper carefully, expecting jewelry or maybe the photo book I'd hinted at last month. But inside was a framed picture of me asleep. My hair sprawled over the pillow, my lips slightly parted. The room behind me was dark, the photo taken in soft light. For a second, I didn't speak. The image felt wrong. Too intimate. Too unaware, Ethan. I finally whispered, forcing a smile. When did you take this? He leaned forward, his grin widening. Last week. You looked so peaceful. I wanted to capture it, keep that moment forever. I nodded, though something twisted in my chest. I told myself it was just his way of being sentimental, that maybe I was overthinking it. But the longer I looked at the photo, the colder my hands became. There was something about it, about me, so vulnerable, so exposed. He lifted his glass. To us, he said. Forever. I echoed the words, the champagne burning in my throat. He held my gaze too long, as if searching for a reflection of himself in my eyes. Later that night, as we drove home, I stared out the window, pretending the silence between us was comfortable. But in my mind, the image of that photograph lingered, his love frozen in that frame and me asleep, unaware of what he saw when I wasn't looking, and for the first time in years, I wondered if I should have stayed awake. When I think back to the beginning, it's hard to separate love from illusion. Ethan had entered my life like a calm after a storm, steady, reassuring, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by standing near. I met him at a gallery opening where I was covering a local art piece for a magazine. He noticed me before I noticed him, or at least that's what he liked to say later. He told me he'd watched me linger too long before one painting, a faceless woman lost in a blur of color, and thought, she's the kind who feels too deeply. He was charming in a way that made you forget to question him. He listened, really listened, and remembered every small detail. On our 3rd date, he quoted something I'd said on our 1st. It felt flattering then, like proof that I mattered. Only later did I realize how carefully he studied people, collecting their weaknesses like secrets. Back then, I mistook his intensity for passion. When he insisted on picking me up every day, I thought it was sweetness. When he wanted to meet my friends immediately, I called it enthusiasm. But slowly, those gestures grew sharp edges. He didn't like Maya, said she was too loud and didn't understand commitment. He'd frown if I wore lipstick that drew attention, or if a coworker texted me too late at night. I remember once, after a small argument, he brought me flowers and whispered, "I just love you too much, that's all." I believed him. I always did. It was easier to believe it was love than control. But sitting across from him last night, with that photograph framed between us, I felt the echo of those early days. The way he watched me then, the way he watches me now. I used to think I was lucky that he chose me, that his love was something rare. Now I wonder if what he loved was never me, but the version of me he could keep still, quiet, and his. Sometimes I replay our first meeting and ask myself the same question over and over. Did I fall in love with him? Or did he choose me because I was easy to cage? It was the rain that woke me. Soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the windows like restless fingers. The clock read 2:47 a.m. The bed beside me was empty, sheets cool where Ethan should have been. His phone was gone too. For a moment I told myself he was downstairs, maybe reading, maybe working late again. But the house was too quiet, too still. I slipped out of bed and padded to the window. The driveway was empty. His car was gone. Outside, the world looked half drowned in fog, the kind that swallowed sound. I tried calling him once, twice, no answer. My pulse quickened with each ring. I told myself not to panic, but something inside me whispered that this wasn't new. He'd been distant lately, quieter, almost watching me more than speaking. When the door finally opened near dawn, I nearly jumped. Ethan stepped in, rain clinging to his coat. He looked startled to see me waiting. "Couldn't sleep," he said quickly, forcing a tired smile. "Went for a drive. Just needed to clear my head." I wanted to believe him, but his eyes darted past me instead of at me. His shoes left muddy prints on the floor, thick dark streaks like shadows that wouldn't wash away. He smelled faintly of wet earth and gasoline. Later, when he showered, I picked up his jacket from the chair. Inside one pocket, my fingers brushed something rough, a small, torn photograph. My photograph. The one from our honeymoon in Italy. My face was ripped in half, my stomach turned cold. I folded it back carefully, pretending not to notice when he came out and kissed my forehead, as though nothing had happened. That morning, as sunlight crept weakly through the curtains, I caught our reflection in the glass, him behind me, his hand on my shoulder, smiling. And for the first time, I couldn't tell if that smile was meant for me or the woman he imagined I was. The call came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, local. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me pressed accept. "Hello?" For a few seconds, only silence. Then a woman's voice, low and shaky, almost a whisper. "He's not who you think he is." The words hung there, sharp and thin, cutting through the calm like glass. "Who is this?" I asked, my throat tightening. But the line went dead before I finished the question. I stood frozen, the dial tone buzzing like static in my ears. My first instinct was fear, then denial. Maybe it was a prank, a wrong number. But the way she'd said it, the certainty in her voice, it felt personal. It felt directed. When Ethan came home later, I tried to sound casual. "Someone called today," I said, setting down his coffee. "A woman. She said something strange." He looked up slowly. "Strange how?" "She said, 'He's not who you think he is.'" Then hung up. For a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe fear. Then it was gone. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Clara, you've been watching too many crime shows." "Probably a scammer," I frowned. "She knew me by name, Ethan." He leaned back, voice softening. "Sweetheart, you're tired. You've been anxious lately. Sometimes our minds connect dots that aren't there." The way he said it, calm, rational, patient, made me doubt myself. I hated how easily he could make me question my own instincts. Still that night, I replayed the voice in my head. "He's not who you think he is." When I finally drifted to sleep, the phone call echoed behind my eyelids. Blending with the image of the torn photograph and Ethan's muddy shoes, I woke to find him watching me again, quiet, unreadable, as if studying my dreams. He smiled faintly and whispered, "You should really stop worrying so much." But his tone wasn't comforting. It was a warning disguised as care. And for the first time, I realized love shouldn't sound like that. After that phone call, something in Ethan shifted. Or maybe he simply stopped pretending. His concern became constant, suffocating. He started checking my phone, saying it was for safety. When I hesitated, he smiled. The same calm smile that made every demand sound reasonable. "I just need to know you're okay," he'd say, thumb brushing my cheek. But his eyes weren't kind, they were calculating. Soon he began managing my days. What I wore, who I met, when I left the house. He'd call it structure, a way to keep our marriage strong. When I told him I wanted to meet Maya for coffee, he frowned. "You know she doesn't respect our relationship," he said softly. "She fills your head with doubts." By the next day, my contact list had mysteriously lost her number. The walls of our home began to feel closer, the air heavier. I smiled when he watched, laughed when he joked, but I kept my real thoughts elsewhere. In a small leather journal I hid inside an old cereal box. It became my only confession space. I wrote everything, the way his tone changed when I disagreed, the way he'd touch my shoulder just long enough to remind me he could. One evening, I caught him staring at me from across the living room. The TV flickered blue light over his face, making his eyes look hollow. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "You're not keeping secrets from me, are you?" My breath caught, but I forced a smile. "Of course not." He nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the screen. But I noticed my phone on the table, the screen unlocked, messages open. His doing. That night I wrote only one line in my journal. I think he's trying to erase me, piece by piece. Before I went to bed, I hid the book deeper this time, inside the lining of a winter coat I never wore. As I lay beside him, his arm draped heavily over me, I stared into the dark and wondered, if this was love, why did it feel like a prison I'd built with my own hands? Outside, thunder murmured in the distance, the same sound that would lead me, days later, to the secret he never meant me to find. It happened on a gray afternoon, when Ethan left for a client meeting. I didn't believe him anymore, but I nodded, pretending to. The moment the door closed, the silence in the house pressed down like a weight. I walked into his study, the one room he always kept locked, though lately he'd grown careless. He'd left the key in the drawer that morning, and curiosity, or maybe desperation, pushed me forward. The air inside was colder than the rest of the house, faintly metallic like dust and forgotten things. His desk was immaculate, everything aligned with eerie precision. But behind a stack of invoices, something caught my eye. A leather-bound photo album, edges worn, corners bent as if it had been handled too often. I hesitated, heart hammering, then opened it. At first, I thought the photos were of me. The resemblance was unsettling. Same dark hair, same soft smile. But the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't me. Her eyes were a little wider, her chin sharper. A woman who looked like me but wasn't. Her name was written on the first page in Ethan's handwriting, Marissa. The photos grew stranger the further I flipped. Her cooking in the kitchen, sitting on a couch, sleeping in bed, all taken from a distance like someone had been watching. My stomach twisted as I turned the last page and saw a newspaper clipping tucked inside. Local woman still missing. Police seek new leads in Marissa Hale case. The air rushed out of my lungs. Ethan had never mentioned anyone named Marissa, but I could feel her presence everywhere now. In the way he watched me. In the photograph he'd taken of me sleeping. In every word he'd ever called love. A noise outside made me jump. A car door slamming, footsteps on the porch. I snapped the album shut and shoved it back where I found it, forcing myself to breathe. When Ethan entered moments later, rain dripping from his coat, he smiled softly. "Miss me?" I smiled back, the taste of fear thick on my tongue. Because now, when he looked at me, I wasn't sure he saw me at all. Only the ghost of a woman who'd vanished before I ever came along. 2 days after I found the album, a knock sounded at the door just after noon. I opened it to find a man in plain clothes, his badge clipped to his belt. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked politely. "I'm Officer Reed. I'd like to ask a few questions about your husband. Ethan Hale." The name struck like a chill through my spine. I nodded and let him in. His eyes swept the living room. Calm, observant, too practiced to be casual. "I'm working on a cold case," he said, lowering his voice. "A woman named Marissa Hale. She went missing 6 years ago. Your husband was listed as her partner at the time." I felt my stomach turn. I didn't know," I stammered. "He never mentioned her." Reed watched me carefully. "That doesn't surprise me." He stopped cooperating after a few interviews. "But I thought you should know. Her family still believes he had something to do with it." My mouth went dry. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "But sometimes the truth starts whispering again, even after people try to bury it." Before I could respond, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Ethan's car. My pulse spiked. "You should go," I whispered urgently. Reed nodded, slipped me his card, and disappeared out the back door just as Ethan stepped inside. He looked at me, wet hair clinging to his forehead. "Who was that?" "No one," I lied quickly. "A delivery." His gaze hardened. "There was a car outside, Clara. Don't lie to me." I tried to deflect, but he was already too close, his voice low and trembling with restrained rage. "You talked to someone about me, didn't you?" "I didn't," I whispered, but his hand gripped my arm, fingers pressing too tight for a moment. I saw the man he truly was, not loving, not protective, but terrified of being seen. That night I lay awake, bruised and shaking. His words echoed beside me like a promise. "If you betray me, Clara, you'll regret it, and in the dark, I began to believe him. Ethan left early that morning, muttering something about an urgent client meeting. His tone was sharp, clipped, the residue of last night's anger still hanging between us. As soon as the sound of his car faded down the street, I stood in the hallway, staring at the basement door. The one he always kept locked, the one he'd warned me never to open. For weeks, I'd felt the quiet hum of something down there, like the house itself was holding its breath. I searched his office first, my hands trembling. The key was hidden behind a framed photo of us, taped to the back like a secret confession. I almost laughed. Even his affection had layers of deceit. The basement smelled of damp concrete and something faintly chemical. A single bulb flickered overhead as I descended the stairs. At the bottom, I froze. The room wasn't for storage, it was a shrine. On one wall hung photos, hundreds of them. Me at the grocery store, walking to work, sleeping. Some were printed in black and white, others neatly labeled with dates. Beneath them sat a dusty jewelry box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace engraved with the name Marissa. My knees weakened. He had kept her here too, in memory if not in body. Beside the table stood an old camcorder. My fingers hesitated before I pressed play. The screen flickered. My face appeared, asleep in our bed, breathing softly while Ethan's shadow moved in and out of the frame. His voice, low and reverent, whispered, "You're perfect when you're still." The room spun. I grabbed the necklace and stumbled upstairs, slamming the door behind me. My heart raced so hard it hurt. With shaking hands, I dialed the number on Officer Reed's card. "I found something," I whispered when he answered. "You were right about him. Stay calm," Reed said. "Don't confront him. I'll handle it." But as I hung up, I heard the faint crunch of tires outside. Ethan's car pulling into the driveway earlier than expected. The key turned in the lock upstairs. I hid the necklace in my pocket and forced my breath to steady. The door opened. His voice drifted down the hall, warm, familiar, terrifying. "Clara," he called softly, "what have you been doing today?" And I knew then, the cage was smaller than I'd ever imagined. I knew the moment he walked through the door that he knew. His smile was too still, too practiced, like a mask worn to hide something feral underneath. He set his briefcase down slowly and turned to me, eyes gleaming faintly in the low light. "You called someone today," he said softly. It wasn't a question. My throat tightened. "Ethan, He raised a hand, calm but trembling. "Don't lie to me, Clara. You went to the police. You talked to that detective." My breath caught. The silence between us pulsed like static. "You've been keeping things from me," I managed, voice shaking. "I found the room. The photos. The necklace." His expression changed. Not shock, not guilt, but something eerily close to relief. "I thought you might," he said, almost tenderly. "You were getting too close to the truth." "What truth?" He took a step closer. "That I only ever wanted to protect you." Marissa didn't listen. She pushed and pried until she broke everything we had. His eyes flicked to mine, unblinking. I couldn't let her ruin what was perfect. I stumbled back. "You hurt her, didn't you?" His voice lowered to a whisper. "She left me no choice." The room seemed to shrink around us. I felt the wall at my back as he stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You're not like her," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You still can be saved. You still believe in love." "Ethan, this isn't love," I said, my voice breaking. "It's control. It's fear." His smile faltered. "No, Clara, it's devotion. You just don't understand yet." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside hammered against the windows like frantic hands. Then, in a quiet, trembling voice, he said, "You made me do this. You brought them here. Now I have to fix it. Again." Something cold spread through me as I realized he wasn't just confessing. He was warning me. And when he reached into his pocket, I understood. The part of Ethan that once loved me was gone. All that remained was the obsession he mistook for devotion. And it was coming for me next. The storm had already started when I ran. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rolling like an approaching beast. My hands shook as I fumbled with the front door, keys slipping through my trembling fingers. Behind me, I heard his footsteps. Steady, deliberate, terrifyingly calm. "Clara." Ethan's voice echoed through the hall, low and commanding. "Come back." We can still fix this. I could barely breathe. My pulse thundered in my ears as lightning illuminated the room in flashes of white and blue. His shadow stretched long and warped across the floor, moving closer with every flash. "Don't do this," I whispered, more to myself than him. He appeared at the end of the corridor, soaked from the rain, eyes wild. "You think you can just leave me?" he shouted. "After everything I've done for you?" I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and threw it. It shattered against the wall, shards glittering like ice. "Stay away from me, Ethan." His voice cracked, equal parts fury and desperation. "If I can't have you, no one will." I turned and ran up the stairs, my bare feet slipping on the wet floor. He followed, his heavy steps pounding behind me. The thunder outside felt synced to the rhythm of our fear, the storm and the chaos merging into one violent pulse. In the bedroom, I slammed the door, locking it with shaking hands. My reflection flickered in the window, pale, frantic, drenched in sweat. For a moment there was silence. Then the doorknob rattled. "Clara," he said again, softer now. "Please, you're forcing me to do this." The door burst open. He lunged, grabbing my wrist. We struggled, breath, rain, glass, and terror colliding. His face twisted in anguish. "I loved you." Something primal took over. I pushed him hard. He stumbled back, time slowed. His head struck the marble floor with a sickening crack. The world went silent. I stood frozen, the storm still raging outside, lightning illuminating his motionless body. The rain carried on, uncaring, washing the blood into the cracks of the floor. And as the silence deepened, one thought echoed in my head. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the truth. The storm had died by the time I heard the sirens. Their wails cut through the quiet like a broken lullaby, growing louder until flashing red and blue lights painted the walls. I sat on the floor beside him, Ethan's body still, eyes open but empty. My hands were sticky with blood, my breath shallow, my mind hollow. When the door burst open, I didn't move. Officers rushed in, their boots splashing through the puddles that had formed from shattered glass and rain. Someone shouted, "We've got a casualty." Another voice murmured something about defensive wounds, but their words floated around me like distant echoes. Officer Reed crouched beside me. His voice was gentle, careful. "Clara, it's over. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, almost cruel. My gaze stayed on Ethan's face, so peaceful now, as if he'd simply fallen asleep. The rage, the obsession, the endless watchings, all gone. And yet even in death I could still hear him. "You were mine." I tried to speak, but all that came out was a sob. Reed draped his coat over my shoulders, guiding me away from the scene. My bare feet left faint red prints across the marble, the same marble that had ended it all. Outside, dawn was breaking, the storm clouds splitting open to reveal a pale, uncertain light. Reporters' voices buzzed faintly beyond the police tape, but I barely noticed. Reed spoke softly beside me. "It was self-defense, Clara. No jury will see it any other way." I nodded, though I didn't believe him. Self-defense didn't erase the years that had led to this. The fear, the lies, the slow unraveling of who I'd been. As I watched them carry Ethan's body away, something in me fractured. Relief and guilt tangled so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. The sun rose, bleeding gold through the clouds, and in its fragile light, I realized survival wasn't the end. It was its own kind of haunting. It's been 6 months since the night everything ended. New city, new apartment, new name on the mailbox. Clara Hayes instead of Clara Monroe. My therapist says I'm rebuilding, reclaiming my life one small choice at a time. I've learned to cook for one again, to sleep without checking the locks 5 times, to breathe without hearing his voice in the dark. For a while I believed it. The city hums differently here, softer, distant. My apartment sits on the 4th floor, overlooking a quiet street lined with maple trees. I've filled it with light and noise, soft jazz in the morning, lavender candles at night. I keep the windows open even when it rains. Freedom, I tell myself, smells like rain and clean sheets. But lately the air feels heavier. The small things started first. My front door left slightly ajar when I was sure I'd locked it. The faint scent of his cologne in the hallway. Footsteps behind me on my evening walks that stopped when I turned around. Trauma rewires the brain, my therapist said. Sometimes we see ghosts where there are none. I wanted to believe that too. Then came the notes. One tucked under my door, another slipped between pages of a book I hadn't opened in weeks, each signed with a single letter, E. At first I told myself it stood for error, maybe a prank, maybe my mind playing tricks. But when the third one appeared, I never left you, Clara. My hands began to shake so violently I dropped my coffee. I reported it, of course. Officer Reed called to reassure me. Could be a copycat, or someone online digging into your case. His tone was calm, measured, but beneath it I heard something else. Doubt. Maybe even pity. That night I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked toward 3 a.m. and I lay awake, staring at the shadows moving across the ceiling. When I finally drifted off, it wasn't peace that found me. It was the old dream. Ethan's voice whispering from behind me. You were never meant to leave. Morning came pale and cold. I opened my door to find an envelope on the floor. Plain, unmarked. My breath caught as I unfolded the photo inside. It was me, sleeping. The angle, the light, everything matched the one Ethan had taken years ago. Except this one was new. My hair, my bedding, my apartment, and on the back in small, deliberate handwriting. Love never dies. Clara, it just changes shape. The photo slipped from my hands, and for the first time since his death I realized, obsession doesn't end with the body. It lingers, watching, waiting. Just beyond the light,